You're listening to Porn Free Masculinity, where you connect to your recovery and your destiny.
Hey guys, we're back again with another episode of The Mirror. I'm Chris.
I'm Rob. Great to be with you, Chris.
Exactly. Always great to spend a day with my friend Rob. And you know what I love most about you, Rob, is I can throw out a line and it can turn into a conversation. And we try to keep these conversations short. But if it was just the two of us around a campfire, maybe I had my pipe out, maybe we had something to drink, maybe we were just enjoying each other's company, we could go deep into the night with a lot of these one-liners, right?
Yeah, I love.
So we have a very cool one to really chew on today, and it's, what does it mean to let go of expectations?
Yeah.
And I'm going to go ahead and throw the therapy line out there. If you've been to therapy, you might have heard expectations are premeditated resentment.
Bingo.
There you go. So if you wonder why expectations matters, there you go. Because if you don't realize why you're resentful, just look back into history, into the things that you thought you were going to get and they didn't happen, and it's baked in, that resentment. Yeah. So what do you hear? What are you resonating with when you think about letting go of expectations?
Yeah. First of all, for my own personal journey, hard, important, and freeing. Those are the three things that come to mind.
Okay.
Hard. So I'm going to go down this road, and I want you to disagree with me if you need to. But
all right,
I feel like for me, expectations have ultimately been a form of self-protection. They come, or they're born out of a place of self-protection. In other words, if I can pre-plan what's going to happen, then I can feel safer about myself because of, some sort of insecurity, little boy, whatever I'm carrying kind of through childhood into adulthood, and kind of the unhealed version of me, wants to create a safe set of ideas or beliefs that I can rely on. And for me, it feels super safe. Now, that's just one aspect of it. How about you? What do you think when I say that?
So as I'm thinking on that, I think I'm with you, but I think I may be traveling parallel, but in a different lane.
Yeah.
Because for me, I think I hear the security part of what you're saying in expectations, is that if I set expectations, then I feel safe and connected and secure. But for me, I think expectations have really been more just a little picture in my window. I'm a 7. I'm an Enneagram 7. So I want to feel the life around me. And so I read into these relationships and these dynamics and these situations, and I get my hopes up artificially because that feels like coming alive. That feels like stepping into who I am. Oh. So for me, the experience itself is the control dynamic, not so much the circumstances, because frankly, and it's probably from my childhood, where if you don't know anything about the Enneagram is not your personality type. The Enneagram is how you learn to cope with the world. And so it's based in your story and what happened. So for me, there was so much dullness and so much deadness that I was expecting the next thing that I came across to bring me life, whether it was a friendship, whether it was a movie, whether it was a party, whether it was a job, whether it was some pursuit in vocational ministry, whatever that was like what I put all my chips into, but extremely naively.
Well, let me ask this question, because little bit of what I hear is you living with expectancy. In other words, I have hope for something better, different, exciting.
Yeah.
How is that different than living with expectations, particularly with someone else in your life? And for those of us that are going through this journey, typically it's a spouse, a partner, a former spouse. Yeah. What is there a difference in your mind of living with expectancy for something good to happen versus putting or living with expectations on someone?
I think for much of my life, there wasn't a differentiation.
Okay.
Because the expectancy was baked into a list of these things will bring me that version of life that I'm looking for. And it wasn't until, frankly, and this is a key piece, it wasn't until I started learning who I was and what I needed that I could temper and tamp down that energy behind expectancy, and vicariously so expectations. For example, I grew up at a lot of family gatherings. That was kind of the highlight of my young life, was extended family gatherings. Thanksgiving, 4th of July, going and playing football with the cousins and all those things. Yeah. So I get married, and my wife had a very small extended family, didn't have any cousins whatsoever. And so there's really no celebration around the holidays. And I'm going, okay, when are we going to have the feast? When are we going to go invite the people over and have this great experience? And so I would get upset around the holidays and not know why, because I was expecting this subconsciously, unconsciously, really. But there was that premeditated kind of joy that I found growing up that I wasn't getting as an adult. So it wasn't until I started doing my work and started understanding what it meant to be me, and this is part of my story, that I started saying, okay, I'm going to accept the responsibility for those expectations and say, if I want to have a big feast and have people over at the holidays, I'm going to be the one that does that. And Rob, I can tell you, for so long, that gap between my desires and my expectancies, my expectations, and the reality of what was going on inside of me was so large that I just basically acted out of it. Mm-hmm. I got angry. I calmed myself, soothed myself. And so I didn't see the connection between those two because I hadn't done that work. Mm. And frankly, I hadn't let go of the reality that it's my responsibility to come to terms with my expectations. Mm.
Yeah, I thank you for sharing that. I can add to that, and thanks for clarifying your thoughts between expectancy, which I think is healthy, by the way. If you show up at an event, it's okay to have expectancy that life and connection and love will exist.
Yeah.
But where it turned really unhealthy for me, back to kind of my relational history, expectations were a form of safety, like I talked about, because I use expectations as a form of control. So, in my kind of my small-mindedness, my small heart, if you will, this kind of younger, insecure version of me would often use expectations on others, particularly my former spouse, for her to show up or perform in a specific way, always to help me feel better about myself.
Yeah.
Always to help me feel like I was loved or accepted, or I was seen, or I was enjoyed. And so in that setting, it would often show, my expectations would often show up as unspoken. So you want to talk about taking a concept, taking an idea, casting it forward, that often does lead to resentment, being self-protective for me, and then doubling down on all of it, Chris, and having expectations that I didn't even state out loud or I didn't even make known. Very controlling, number one. Yep. I would go so far to say, for me, I know this is personal for me, very abusive, at least emotionally abusive. And if the outcome leads to resentment, for me, it led to contempt. Like, I would even double down on the outcome, because that resentment for me was so true. Yeah. I have an expectation for someone in my life to show up a specific way, to treat me a specific way, to help me feel better about myself in a specific way. Didn't happen. Feel the resentment over and over again. It eventually turns to contempt. And as you and I both know, one of the four horsemen from the Gottman folks is contempt is the number one predictor of divorce. And so,
sure.
So I want to bring it full circle. It's not just that expectations lead to resentment, but resentment can ultimately lead to a hatred toward others.
I agree. And so the elephant in the room, I know everybody's thinking it, so let's just go there. Sexual expectations. I've heard this line from a number of guys. I just need sex. I just need it. It's a basic human need. And I think it's important that we recognize what sex is, and maybe we'll have that conversation on another podcast. But I think right now, in this context of sexual expectations, there seems to be this number or this nature or this dynamic that in my intimate relationship, I need to connect in this way or with this frequency. And if I don't, then it's very easy to move into what you just said, into that buried resentment. And of course, over time, that resentment builds up into contempt. And that's where a lot of, other dynamics in relationships can begin to erode. Now, I want to say this, as we're talking about sex, you might include relationship in this. You might include responsibility in this. You might include communication in this. So there's a number of levels of expectation. But I think when we want to get serious, we bring sex up, because that's a topic that everybody's like, oh, damn. Yeah. Okay, now we're getting real.
Yeah, yeah. And in the guys that you and I get to hang out with, including myself, this is real. Number one. Yeah. Number two, I think it ultimately is one of the central components of addiction, sex addiction recovery. Why is sex my most important need? Number three, then the question then, of course, becomes is, how healthy am I between the desire to have sex and the expectation to have sex? Because there's so much that I bypassed for years. Desire equals expectation equals outcome. And as I have learned, there is a whole life to be lived, a healthy version of me to be lived in between desire and the act of intimacy, a physical act of intimacy. Which includes, of course, emotional intimacy, connection, meeting each other's needs, showing up for each other in day-to-day life. That ultimately leads to a place where mutuality can exist in a physical relationship.
That word,
word,
mutuality. Yes,
mutuality, where we're showing up for each other as opposed to me showing up for myself, which is really what expectation is all about. So, So I think the last question then is: can expectation be let go, and is there freedom on the other side of the journey of recovery around the idea of expectation? If anyone's struggling with this concept in their lives, what are your thoughts?
I'm going to answer briefly and then throw it back to you, because I'm really eager. I know you've got a golden nugget that you're going to share, right? So, can it be let go? I would believe the answer is yes. And it lies rooted in what I was talking about earlier, learning to love myself and learning to see my journey as a process. And as I learn to be compassionate with the parts of myself that I like and the ones that I don't like, then I also learn to be compassionate with others around me, especially those that I have the highest level of expectation from, which is generally partner and family.
Yeah.
And so in that self-compassion, that self-acceptance, and it's an experience to get there. You don't wake up and say, I'm loving myself today. No, it takes months or years to get there. At least it did for me. That's really where my level of expectation began to reduce. And also my level of gratitude and enjoyment of the moment began to increase.
Yes. Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, first of all, let me co-sign with you on that one. I think you did a great job. You kind of nailed where I'm at and what I have learned to let go of this idea of expectations. Number one, I think the saying you started this session with, of expectations lead to resentment. The question I had to ask myself: do I really want to live with resentment in my life? So that quote has become ingrained in part of my recovery journey. But for me, it's similar, because if I want to stop using expectations as a form of self-protection, the question then becomes, why am I self-protecting? And how does my journey lead me to a place where I don't need to control, predict, set up circumstances around me to feel comfortable, to feel accepted, to feel loved, to feel okay or good in my own skin. And it starts with self-compassion, right? Just like you described. And I would just summarize it by saying, this is the gift of recovery, of being able to be vulnerable with others so that you can be vulnerable with yourself. Learning how to become friends with others so you can become friends with yourself, and ultimately start to live exactly like you said. And that's accept the moment for what it is, living life on life's terms, regardless of the outcome, and being okay with today, and then again that tomorrow, and then again the next day, and experiencing all that comes with that, even if it doesn't feel good.
Well, and I would say that initially it probably won't feel good because it feels like you're losing something. But I would also say that over time, on the back end of letting go of expectation is this beautiful place of contentment.
Yes.
And in contentment is a place of gratitude and being able to do bold things without fear, and being able to experience true intimacy just because you value being with someone. And it really is transformational. So I think, expectations are definitely a aspect of life that we need to all look to. How can I let go of these? Because the more I let go of my expectations, the more I find myself and the more I am able to enjoy and embrace today and say thank you.
Man.
So grateful to be with you. And I say that to you, my friend.
I love it. That's a great place.
Thank you.
That is a great place to end. And I'm grateful to be with you today as well.
Yes. So we'll come back again another week to have another conversation. But as always, Rob, you are a beautiful, auditorially pleasing man. Your voice soothes me. Sometimes I just put on little segments of the podcast to just rock me to sleep at night. So thank you for your dulcet tones and your presence.
It's great to be with you, Chris.
See you soon, buddy.
See ya.
Don't forget to subscribe for more episodes. You can connect with Chris at pornfreemasculinity.com.